I'm a partner with AWA. I lead that practice, and I've been in the industry for 20 years. Put 10 years in at PwC. Our business has been in business since 2005. It was founded by four former Big Four auditors. We're a CPA registered firm with the ICPA and PCAOB. For the most part, we're a controls related firm. We focus in controls related audits. The types of audits we focus on are PCI DSS assessments, SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3 audits, and high trust certifications. AWA International Group, which is a division of IS Partners, was born about 5 years ago. Our clients came to us and identified a need for more technical resources and technical capabilities, and we responded. We hired individuals with more technical capabilities and skill sets, and from my opinion, just created a better approach to our controls audits, as well as opened up a whole segment of opportunities in the IT space. The types of assessments that we do perform or services is PCI DSS assessments. We provide security framework assessments such as ISO 27001, NIST, and FISMA, which is a segment of NIST, which we all know is extremely important in this new technical environment. We also do penetration testing. That's something that started 2 years ago and has had some tremendous success. It's given our clients even a greater depth of security, as well as HIPAA assessments and security risk assessments, which is some other things that we specialize in. I'd like, for the most part, for this presentation, we have two of our lead technical guys, informing you about cloud basics. We have Mike Cienci. He's a QSA, he's a CISA, and a CISM. He's a director with AWA International Group. He has 20 years experience in technology, as well as auditing and security experience. So he has a large depth of knowledge in security. And we have Josh Perry. He is a CISSP, a certified ethical hacker, and a CCNA security guy. He's an AWA senior consultant with 11 years experience in IT, and the last 4 years focused solely on security, both as a security engineer and as an assessor. So, the experience level here is high. I'm so excited to turn this over to Mike Cienci to go through Cloud Basic with you and give you some really good knowledge. Mike?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. As Anthony just said, we're going to cover some Cloud Basic security features. This is going to be a high-level overview. As you will hear, there are many aspects to cloud, getting into the cloud, and today we just want to provide you a brief overview of some of the topics we feel strongly about. We're going to cover variations of cloud environments, client responsibility, defense and layers, operating systems, access controls, data protection, network security, application development, native AWS services. We're going to talk about some outside help you can get, and at the end we'll have some time for some questions and answers. Some benefits of being in the cloud include the client is not responsible for any hardware. You do not have the upfront expense of having to purchase all your hardware. No support contracts to consider. Cloud providers offer infrastructure as a service, so you only have to pay for what you actually need at the current time. The client is not responsible for physical access to the data center either. The cloud provider is responsible for all physical access since they own the data centers, and this takes all the liability out of your hands. Built-in disaster recovery business continuity capabilities. There are multiple ways you can utilize the cloud to help with your DR and BCP needs. You can use cloud backups to securely store your backup data in the cloud and restore as needed. You can use a hybrid approach and connect your on-premises network to your DR cloud environment. You can create replicas of your servers and your infrastructure and recover to the cloud during a disaster. If you are entirely in the cloud, you can take advantage of multiple regions and zones available to replicate your production environment accordingly. This can make the disaster recovery process much more streamlined. Also, being in the cloud, scalability is simplified. The benefits of cloud computing services include the ability to scale elastically. In cloud speak, meaning you utilize the proper amount of resources only when needed. This offers you the flexibility to adjust the amount of computing power, bandwidth, and storage. Scaling can help keep costs under control by only using the resources you need when you actually need them and turning them off when you don't, thus keeping your costs and expenses in control. Variations of cloud hosting: hosted, fully managed, and cloud backup. A hosted cloud environment will utilize the shared responsibility model. In a hosted shared responsibility model, the cloud service provider takes care of the physical requirements and compute power. However, it's critical to understand that you are responsible for protecting the data and who has access to your environment. Some things to think about are your customer data. Does your customer data need to be encrypted? Identity management. This helps simplify security and can make access control easier for your IT folks to manage. Platform and application management. You want to keep in mind that although your application is in a shared responsibility model, you are still responsible for the SDLC process. Firewall configuration. Firewall rules or security groups must be configured properly to prevent unauthorized access, especially from public-facing networks. Client-side security, you want to implement data integrity authentication. Server-side security, determine if you need file level and or disk encryption. Network traffic protection, implement an IDS IPS solution. Make sure you are encrypting the network traffic. You want to consider what VPN solution you will put in place. Fully managed. The fully managed cloud provider will be responsible for the hardware and operating systems, including all IT infrastructure. Even if you are fully managed, you still need to follow best practices around your application development. You want to implement a secure coding practice or use a scanning tool to check for vulnerabilities in your code. You should also follow the OWASP Top 10 guidelines. Follow best practice change management procedures. Don't allow development access to push code changes to production. User provisioning. You want to grant access based off of the least privileged access guidelines. Cloud backup. A cloud backup utilizes the redundancy of the cloud to store sensitive data. Oftentimes, a company's first step in moving to the cloud starts with backups. Some benefits of cloud backups are reliability, reduced costs. There's no need for a tape or disk-to-disk backups, file transfer security, and it helps with data disaster recovery and meeting some compliance requirements. Defense and layers. When thinking about securing your environment, you may want to use the defense and layers approach. Securing your cloud environment can be a whole webinar in itself. In fact, we will be conducting a future webinar on this exact topic. One of the biggest things you need to understand when moving to the cloud is there are many security features and offerings, but most are not on by default. And it is up to you to turn on and configure them as needed, and also make sure you are monitoring as well. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague, Josh.
Hi, this is Josh Parry. And a little bit of a heads up, we're going to go into all the topics that Mike described, and we're just going to go in pretty much an inch deep. As Mike said, each one of these topics could be their own webinar, and that might be what happens in the future. So I'm going to start with operating systems. And the guest operating system is the responsibility of the client. And when I say the guest operating system, that would be the operating system that lives on the instance, not the hardware that would be the responsibility of the cloud provider. The operating system gets installed on the specific instances or hosts that are running, and examples of the operating system would be Windows Server 2020, Red Hat Linux, CentOS, or Ubuntu. And just like on premises, the basic hygiene of these systems must be maintained as if it were on premises. These maintenance processes include the configuration of the device or service, the system hardening, which could become the removing of applications that aren't used, the removing of services or ports on the system, and then additionally the frequency of the application and operating system patching, any types of threat detection, and the backup and recovery process. Now, moving along, next would be access controls, which organizations implement to prevent unauthorized access. The goal should be to provide your employees with just enough access for them to perform their job responsibilities and nothing else. Best practices include utilizing a centralized identity management, which this helps with terminations, compliance, and for your IT staff, as this is going to be a one-stop shop when you need to change access or remove a user's access. The next, we'll continue on with the least access based on need, which if I am giving an employee access, I'm going to give them just enough to perform their job function, but nothing else, so that if their credentials were ever phished or a malicious actor got in access of their system, that the role the user has is limited based on need. Additionally, multi-factor authentication by adding some type of token authentication to any type of identity management system is going to really bolster your security by adding that second layer of authentication, where a password just isn't enough for access. You also need that additional token. And then finally, you need to secure your storage. Basically, you just want to keep anything that's private, and anything that's public, you make sure you understand it's public. So next, we're going to move to the data protections. Basically, data must be protected when it's stored. And by protecting your data, this could be utilizing some type of key management system or server-side encryption that'll make sure your sensitive data is encrypted at rest. Additionally, we're going to need to verify that data is stored within a database is encrypted. This should always be checked, because for compliance reasons. If you have sensitive data in a database that is not encrypted, it might not meet your compliance needs. And additionally, when you're working with a cloud provider, don't assume the cloud provider will always take responsibility for your sensitive data. There are going to be occasions when utilizing a business associate agreement is required for use with a cloud provider to store your sensitive information. Now we're going to continue on data protection, but on a different element. We're going to focus on the transmission. When data is transmitted, it can become susceptible to snooping. Utilizing secure and encrypted protocols will render that data unreadable and useless to any malicious attacker. Implementing secure protocols for the exchange of data, such as encrypted email, HTTPS, SFTP, or otherwise FTPS, along with any type of VPN for when you're securing data during transmission. Then we're going to move on to network security, where a strong security program will implement protections on the network to limit access and detect malicious traffic as it's transmitted. When dealing with cloud security, a layered approach is still a viable option. Common things that we've always talked about: utilize a denial policy, only allow traffic which is required for business needs. And additionally, anyone that does compliance is familiar with network segmentation, which separates your sensitive data from the other services. An example would be a database should not be in the same network as something that receives web traffic. That should be segmented so that they can communicate, but the communication is severely limited to just what's required. Additionally, some type of centralized monitoring, which receives all the different logs and is sent to a centralized location, can offer an easy solution for IT staff to go look at common metrics, discover possible errors in real time, and just as a best practice for utilizing monitoring. Additionally, we're going to go with network intrusion detection prevention systems, which are capable of monitoring network traffic for possible threats. The difference between an intrusion detection system, which is capable of detecting threats and alerting you to the threats, while a prevention system can actually stop the threats in line on the network and actually prevent the traffic, as opposed in addition to alerting IT that it was detected. Application development. Now, this is going to be one situation in the cloud where everything is going to be the same practice as if it were on premises. The application that you develop for your organization must be secure, and following secure coding guidelines, performing application-specific testing such as static code analysis or dynamic code analysis, or performing application-based penetration testing. And as Mike mentioned earlier, following the OWASP top 10 rules, and also utilizing a web application firewall can go a long way to secure your application in the cloud. Native AWS services. These can include managed databases, managed containers, single sign-on, and a plethora of other services which can be intimidating to understand. Working with a consultant who understands and can suggest improvements is extremely valuable. Not only can you save time with automation, but money as well by implementing a cost-effective use of the cloud. Managed databases is probably the most common that we see with our clients, and instances of this would be an Amazon RDS, DynamoDB, or Aurora. Google Cloud and Azure have similar offerings. Additionally, we talk about CloudTrail and GuardDuty, which again are AWS specific services that can monitor and gather logs and essentially use the logs as threat intelligence to detect any malicious traffic on the network. In addition to the IPS systems utilizing logs, we can utilize elastic load balancers, which are services that will protect your servers, which run in front of your application server to continue to allow the application server to run properly and based on performance and demand, where the elastic load balancer will balance between different servers to allow the traffic not to become to a point where it's detrimental to the service. Additionally, an application firewall is extremely similar to a load balancer, but has the added functionality to allow or block traffic based on the defined criteria. So an application firewall, otherwise known as a layer 7 firewall, is a added layer of security where you can extremely granular block the traffic or move traffic based on the location or other similar criteria that you determine. And all AWS services or all AWS instances are protected by the DDoS shield, which is to protect against the distributed denial of service attack, which is the type of attack we see very common in the news, which has the main goal of taking a service offline. So utilizing a cloud will make you extremely resilient to any type of DDoS attacks. And then the last cloud native service, which is, we single out AWS for this service. However, Google and Azure have the same management systems for identity management to utilize one-stop shop for all identity in the cloud environment. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is outside help. Now, when implementing, maintaining, or even chasing an information security management program, the task can seem daunting. One possible shortcut is to find a partner who can help relieve the anxiety. Pick your vendors, contractors, and assessors wisely, as they're not all created equal. Some options that a third party can assist with can be a compliance audit, such as PCI, HITRUST, or ISO, and then in addition, security risk assessments. Now, security risk assessments can be gap analysis based on those compliance or based on other compliance frameworks. Additionally, performing penetration testing and vulnerability scanning are services that can be offered by outside help. And then additionally, independent security reviews, such as reviewing firewall rules, user permissions, or privileged access reviews. If you're familiar with compliance standards, you'll know that that is something that almost every compliance standard is going to require, and that's something that a valuable third party can actually assist with and help your organization get under control. And then finally, some of the more physical services or hands-on services would be security operations center, firewall management, and SIM management. Essentially, a third party could come in and operate either your security operations, firewall management, or your SIM, your centralized logging, and that is something that can provide a lot of value to your organization. Yep, and I'll hand this back to Anthony Jones.
Hey, how are you? So that kind of wraps up our discussion. What I'd like to do is open this up to any questions, and we can answer these questions. So if you have questions, I would like you to just go through Zoom and send the questions in, and we'll address those. Okay, there's one coming in. Uh, what are the biggest challenges to migrating to the cloud? Josh or Mike, who would like to answer this one?
I'll take this one. Thanks, Anthony. Couple of things. I guess one of the biggest concerns or challenges you may have is you may have staff that's not familiar with the cloud. We have seen firsthand with clients that rush to they rush to get their services and databases in the cloud. They might have mistakenly left an S3 bucket open to the public, and that could lead to a data breach, which would be very unfortunate. It could be detrimental to your company. The other thing you want to keep in mind would be cost. Like I said earlier in my presentation, you can slowly jump into the cloud, and you may want to just start with some cloud backups. That's one good easy way to get into the cloud first. The other thing you want to keep in mind would be the amount of assets you have and how you're going to put them into the cloud. Yep.
All right. So thank you very much, Mike. We got another question here this is one that our clients seem to always get wrong, right? If I am in the cloud, does that mean I'm secure? Who'd like to take this one?
This is Josh here. I could take that. I would say no. Uh, Nothing in life is easy, right? So I would say getting to the cloud is half the battle, and then actually securing it to make sure that you're safe and that nobody malicious comes knocking, that they're going to be able to find a way to get in. And that's why we say, perform assessments, perform penetration testing, perform vulnerability scanning. An active security program will determine if you're secure or not. So that's what I would say is get in the cloud, and then once you get in, start building your controls against the topics that we've just discussed. And then after each one of those topics, that is when you're going to start, measuring and monitoring the controls that you have in place. And that's when you're going to perform those types of reviews, because it's one thing to be secure, it's another thing to stay secure. So that's what I would say. Natively, you're not secure in the cloud. You have to achieve it.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. And I think a lot of our clients get that wrong. We have another question here. Will I still keep my compliance status if I migrate to the cloud? It's an interesting question. Mike, would you mind addressing this one?
Sure. Again, based off of our experience, this is another area of confusion that some of our clients have. Now, you may be compliant right now, you move to the cloud, and you think, well, AWS has PCI certification. AWS has SOC 1 and SOC 2. I've seen the reports. Therefore, I must also be compliant, and I don't have to do anything. And that, again, is another common mistake that we see happen repeatedly. Just because AWS or Google offers centralized monitoring doesn't mean you meet that requirement. You still have to set that up, and you still have to proactively take those measures to make sure you're actively monitoring. IDS, IPS is another thing. They both offer that service. It's not on by default. Even if it is, you still have to monitor. You need to set up the alerts. You need to be notified. You need to configure to take the actions necessary to meet that compliance. And that's just two brief examples. There are a lot of other things that that you need to make sure you have in place to continue to be compliant. I know that both AWS and Google offer matrices you could download that shows you like their responsibility, your responsibility, and then what requirements could be a shared responsibility.
Excellent. Spot on, Mike. We have one more question here. We got time for one more, and I think we're going to have to wrap it up from at that point. How can I retrain my staff to operate in the cloud? Who would like to take this one?
I could take that one. All right. Now, this is kind of a tough question because, the cloud and DevOps are still fairly new and are changing every day. But I would say the best approach, honestly, as most of IT, would be self-study. There are plenty of online resources between AWS, Google, and Azure, between Docker and Kubernetes, and all different DevOps and cloud features. There are some very good courses you could take, but I think self-study and hands-on. I think having IT staff set up their own little home labs in Azure, Google, or AWS can go a long way. And I think self-study would be the best answer at this point, but there are obviously courses and things you can take.
Excellent. So I'd like to wrap this up here. A couple of things to note. We talked about outside help and getting advice or advisory services around the cloud and security around the cloud. You're more than welcome to call us. We can guide you through that process and help you bridge the gap between compliance and security. Other things to note, if you have other additional questions, you can call us. Any questions that were not addressed, we're going to add to our blog, so check our blog out. And I just like to thank everyone, thank Mike and Josh first for their participation in this process. And I'd also like to thank you guys for logging in. We appreciate the tremendous response we've gotten. And everyone have a great day. Thank you.